Hello everyone and welcome to the module 4 of our contract drafting course. We have successfully completed our 3 modules, and in the last module we have discussed that how to exactly draft a NDA and a consultancy agreement. Now in this module we will move forward and we will learn to how exactly we draft a rent agreement, and then we will move on to studying about the link between negotiation and drafting. How negotiation is a very important skill that every advocate should have or should possess in order to draft your documents in a much better way. How negotiation basically helps in drafting, we will be learning that aspect today. Then we will move forward to identifying and managing the contractual risks that are present while drafting any sort of agreements, and the negotiation process exactly that we follow in process of making a agreement. Now let's first start with the drafting of a rent agreement. We have already studied and we have already dived into how to exactly draft NDA and a service agreement. Now let's similarly we will look into a similar kind of draft for a rent agreement, and we will understand how exactly we draft different clauses in a rent agreement, what are the important clauses that we must include, and how to exactly draft it in order to avoid any confusions or any disputes. So let's move on to our draft of a rental agreement, right? So let's start with the first one, introductory paragraph, the preamble para. Let's read. This rental agreement is executed at place. You will write the place where the rental agreement is basically executed. On this date, you will write the date of the execution here. Between name of the owner, parents' detail, permanent address of the owner. Hereinafter jointly and severally called the owner. Now here basically when we use this line, as already discussed in our previous draft as well, now we will not repeat the person name again and again. We will address that person as owner. Now, which expression shall include their heirs, legal representatives, successors and assignees of the one part, and in the favor of, here we will write the tenant details, the name of the tenant, parent name of the tenant, and studying or working at the of the tenant, we will write the address here. We will write the address of the office or the institution where the person is studying, we will write here, and the address we will write here. And this person will be called as tenant in this agreement. Now whenever we are referring to these persons, the name of the owner and the name of the tenant, for example, the name of the owner is X and the name of the tenant is Y, but when we are referring to this agreement, we will not repetitively mention X and Y, X and Y, X and Y has this duty, X has this duty. We will not mention that. We will use the word owner and tenant respectively in different clauses of our agreement. Which expression shall include its legal representatives, successors, assignees of the other parts. Now, when you see this preamble, what we basically identify here, what all are the things that we basically understand while reading this preamble part. We identify the party, that who is the landlord, who is the owner, and who is the tenant, that means who is the occupant. Then this preamble basically provided us with the basic details such as name, their parents' name, the permanent address, and the place and the date of execution of the agreement. Now let's move on to the next para of the same preamble, where we will be understanding the purpose of entering into this agreement. Why both the parties, the X and Y, why exactly both of them are entering into this agreement, are signing this agreement. So, whereas the owner is the absolute owner of the property, situated at the complete address of the rented property. Now here is the permanent address of the owner, right? And here is the address of the rented property, because it might happen that owner has two premises. One is his permanent house where he is living, and he is renting out his another property. So here we will write the address of the rented property, the property which basically Y is interested in renting out, and here we will write the address of X where basically he is residing. As detailed in Annexure 1, hereinafter referred to as demised premises. Whereas the tenant has requested the owner to grant rent with respect to the scheduled premises, and the owner has agreed to rent out the tenant the property with 2-wheeler and a 4-wheeler parking space in the ground floor for residential purpose only on the following terms and conditions. Now here what is very important, that we need to classify that what are the parking space that we are providing, because if in future these can avoid any disputes between the tenant and the owner. Rest, we have also mentioned that the property is rented out only for the residential purposes. That means the tenant is not allowed to carry on any business or any commercial activity on the rented property. Now let's discuss the further terms and conditions of this agreement. The first one is, when we look into the first one, this basically defines the tenure of the tenancy, right? So it basically say that it shall commence from the starting date of agreement and shall valid until the expiry date of agreement. So it has a tenure of tenancy. So in common practice, mostly 11th month agreement is basically the parties enter into an 11th month agreement. This is because as per Registration Act, to avoid mandatory registration required for leases beyond 1 year. So whenever there is a lease agreement between the two parties that exceeds 1 year, there is a mandatory requirement of registration as per the Registration Act. So in common practice, people enter into an agreement of less than a year, that means of 11 months, to basically avoid the mandatory registration requirement as per the Registration Act. Now, second clause, that the tenant shall pay the owner a monthly rent of rupees. Here we have to mention the monthly rent amount, excluding the electricity and water bill. That means the rent amount doesn't include electricity and water bill. It's very necessary to include the exclusions and the inclusions in your monthly rent amount. The rent shall be paid on or before the 7th day of each month. So whenever you are drafting this clause, it is very important to first mention the amount of the rent. Second, to mention that this rent amount basically includes what category of other payments. Like in our example, it excludes electricity and water bill. That means the tenant has to pay, for example, if the rent amount is 10,000 rupees, so the your tenant has to pay 10,000 rupees amount as a monthly rent, and excluding the electricity and monthly bill. That means if the electricity bill is 1k and your water bill is 500 rupees, so basically the tenant has to pay 10,000 and then 1,000 and then 500 rupees. That means 11,500. So this is what the tenant has to pay. Now, and the next thing that we have specified is the 7th day of each month without fail. We have clearly specified that the rent should be paid on or before the 7th day of the each month. So all these clarifications are very necessary in order to avoid any dispute while we are drafting a rent agreement.